Hi, this presentation is on language acquisition and teaching strategy. My name is Jillian Bentley, and this is my email address in case I can follow up with more questions or clarify something from the presentation. To begin, let's talk about first language learning theories. There's behaviorist, which is a culturally determined theory of language learning, nativist, where the theory is that people are born with basic innate language learning capacity, and it is characterized by language acquisition devices. Social interactionist is a child's linguistic environment determines their learning of language and often is characterized by parent ease or how a parent talks to a child and how they learn. Brain-based theory is a complex issue, including more than cognitive functions, is determiner of first language learner. And language learning is determined largely by age, motivation, comprehensible input, effective conditions, and teaching methods. Krashen has a theory called second language acquisition, SLA, with 5 hypotheses: acquisition versus learning, natural order, monitor hypothesis, effective filter, and input theories. Language acquisition is a subconscious process. Language develops while you're unaware through passive input. It is a feeling and natural understanding. It is easy communication, is a subconscious process. There are stages of language development and language acquisition. First is the production or the silent period. Although students do not speak during this period, they may possess up to 500 words in their receptive vocabulary. And again, this is for language learning, second language learning. Students in a silent stage may repeat words, and teachers should support those students by speaking clearly, stating keywords, and helping them build more vocabulary. The second stage is early production stage, and this occurs between 6 months to a year of learning English. During this stage, students bring their receptive vocabulary to active use while learning up to 500 new words. Teachers should use Railia and visuals to support instruction, ask yes or no questions for comprehension, and accept short responses, and adapt content material and differentiate, and encourage writing using sentence frames or scaffolding. And the third stage is speech emergence. First and third years of learning is this time. Students communicate using simple sentences and phrases, and teachers should use words. And students are using words and grammatical constructions that are not always correct. The students are able to ask questions, participate in some activities, and engage in short conversations during the speech emergence stage. The last 2 stages of language development are intermediate fluency, where students attempt to use more complex sentence structures, ask comprehension questions, and share answers in class. And the teachers should model helpful learning strategies that students can use independently in class and at home, such as asking clarifying questions, redefining vocabulary. Advanced fluency is the last stage, achieving bilinguality, where students are performing at grade level in academics and content areas. And English learners have a mastery of complex structures of the language, applying them in speaking and writing. Teachers should check for comprehension often, suggesting study guides, reinforcement materials, additional vocabulary, practice, and introduction. Second language acquisition is dependent upon comprehensible input. This language acquisition hinges on understanding and transmitting a message. Language acquisition will take place when the learner understands the message. It's comprehensible, they can understand it. The message that people understand is comprehensible input. Krashen argues that we acquire language and develop literacy by understanding messages, not by concisely learning about language and not by memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary. As well as comprehensible input, students also should have an environment with a low affective filter. The learner must feel secure and unthreatened in the learning environment in order to acquire language naturally, and teachers should identify and utilize the practices that motivate students, lessen their anxiety, and sustain their interest in learning. One of Krashen's hypotheses is the monitor hypothesis, and Krashen believed acquisition gives us fluency and learning gives us accuracy. Learning develops a conscious monitor. Before you speak, you create a phrase from the acquisition or subconscious understanding of language. Before you speak, your conscious mind scans it for editing and correctness based on your knowledge or learning structures. Recently, there's been a challenge to the monitor hypothesis in Krashen's second language acquisition theory. The challenges include a lack of evidence in testing producing empirical research, a lack of precision and explanatory power, and the hypothesis bypasses counter evidence. Even so, teachers can continue to use the second language acquisition model or the second language acquisition theory in teaching strategy by materializing with specific grammatical structures and implementing strategies to create a more precise characterization of the possible interactions between learner and input. So that's recognizing the comprehensible input structure and how teachers can create an environment in their learning model that will give ground to the second language acquisition theory. The structures that the teachers can utilize or that recognizes the lack of evidence from the second language acquisition theory is the concept of universal grammar. A recent study in 2002 showed that universal grammar, which is an experience-independent linguistic knowledge, is developed without much apparent instruction. So a language one, or a person's first language, is developed without direct instruction that you would see in a classroom. And this points to an innate ability to structure language and to understand that languages have structure. And therefore, the bilingual acquisition acts in the same way that we can recognize language structures and that all languages have an underlying universal grammar. An example is babies being able to recognize different generative grammar structures points to an innate ability for bilingual people to translanguage and understand which structure should be used when choosing which language to communicate with. Included in the ways that the second language acquisition theory can be implemented with specific strategies by teachers is recognizing the zone of proximal development, which is a domain or metaphorical space where children can reach a higher level of knowledge and performance with the support of an adult. This includes and requires scaffolding for language learning, which is using tools to assist students in moving through zones of proximal development. The scaffolding can include elaborating and clarifying, supporting ideas with evidence, building on or challenging ideas, paraphrasing, and synthesizing. The implications on teaching for zone of proximal development. For levels 1 and 2, teachers should assign tasks that are within students' zone. Learners should be stretched beyond their own independent ability, but not beyond their ability without assistance. In level 3 zone, teachers should provide assistance for their students so they can complete tasks within their zone. Level 4, these tasks should be scaffolded, as previously mentioned, so that students can isolate and solve the educative challenge and learn to complete tasks independently. Level 5 is giving students the hardest tasks they can do with scaffolding, as mentioned before, which will lead to their greatest learning gains. And level 6, creating a teaching environment for student learning so students can complete the hardest tasks. So moving students through the zones using scaffolding will show the greatest gains in language learning. Also, adding depth to the lack of research to the second language acquisition theory is by recognizing basic interpersonal communication skills and cognitive academic language proficiency, which is the difference between social language and academic language. These two language usages are either context embedded or context reduced. Context embedded is environmental, social, academic resources to assist with target language use. Both language uses or skills have appropriate settings, and we're looking at academic or teaching academic language to language learners. And so we're going to reference the Freeman's approach to acquiring academic language. And their definition of academic language includes words, sentences, and structures to express learning of content. And their underlying focus is that vocabulary is important, but the context is most important for expressing ideas and learning when acquiring language. Two teaching strategies are communicative language teaching, which is learning to communicate a message, fluency as means of communication, the integration of varying language skills, and creative construction and trial and error, and whole language teaching, an emphasis on teaching reading strategies and skills within the meaningful context of whole. So we're going to move those theories of language acquisition to the further implications on classroom teaching. Language acquisition should be engaging and fun. Language is for communication and expression. Acquiring language is a natural process and should be taught in schools through a flow of conversation. That's the basis of these next strategies. Traditional and less effective methods include drill and practice and grammar focused. Addressing drill and practice, the acquisition versus learning theory from Krashen's second language acquisition theory is that natural communication is more significant. Students will experience a slight period where language skills are developing slowly, and to drill and practice is counterproductive to their natural acquisition. And when classrooms are grammar focused, the language is sort of muted, where acquisition of correct language will evolve gradually and naturally within the school curriculum, according to the natural order hypothesis within the SLA model. So instead, we are looking at communicative language teaching with an emphasis on learning to communicate a message, fluency as a means of communication, integration of varying language skills, and creative construction in trial and error. One way to achieve this in classroom instruction is conducting reflective lesson planning. The process of this is to reflect on student background knowledge and gaps, understanding their cultural and history implications, identifying lesson goals for language and content, selecting strategies based on student needs, so knowing your class well, setting up a class environment that's conducive to low affective filter learning, and creating a positive class culture. Also creating learning opportunities that are engaging, and then as a teacher reflecting on your achievement of the goals that you set for students' language learning. Some strategies for the opportunities mentioned previously is to teach vocabulary directly and indirectly through vocabulary activities and also through natural conversation to ensure multiple meaningful exposures to new words and lots of natural practice opportunities, and to involve families, community, and incorporate culture into activities and lessons so that they're relevant and applicable to students' lives. Some more specific teaching strategies are cooperative learning, which is providing organic and low affected filter opportunities for students to work together to practice language. Also building self-efficacy, which is to build challenging tasks where students feel highly motivated to succeed, where motivation is a great determiner of language acquisition. Creating a learner-centered classroom, which is creating and fostering independent environment where students take control of their own learning using the tools they have showed, teachers have showed, and that's including choice in the learner-centered classroom for students to engage with activities that they feel more connected with. To help students set goals where teachers help English language learners develop their own language goals and track their own progress. Students feel ownership of their journey and are motivated by marking their own successes, which increases motivation. To have a fun, engaging activity set that students enjoy participating, where teachers offer incentives for achieving goals, and providing scaffolding, like mentioned with zone of proximal development progression, where teachers offer tools such as sentence frames, models, and graphic organizers, and use strategies such as think aloud and gradual release to move students through zone of proximal development. These are my references, including my research, to expand on my previous knowledge. Thank you so much. Have a great day.